All right, Isaiah, thank you for that. Might make LeBron the top scorer, but do you think it makes him the GOAT, the greatest of all time in the NBA?
I don't know. That's hard with Michael Jordan. I mean, that's going to be an ongoing debate, and I don't think it's ever going to be solved.
I don't know. All right, Isaiah, thank you for that. We'll talk to you a little bit later. Right now, we're going to welcome in our next live guest. We've got Nick Oliver joining us from Metaphora to talk a little bit about what to do with your life during a volatile time in the market. Nick, thank you for being here.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, Nick, and it's great to have you on. Of course, always great to have Metaphora involved, and we're excited to talk about this topic because it's so applicable right now. It's definitely a volatile market when you're looking at what's going on with easing conditions, but some have expectations of improving conditions going into the middle part of the year. What are going to be some of the first headline items that you really need to start looking at when you're looking at navigating in a volatile market?
Yeah, definitely. I would look at three core focus areas. So first, customer interactions and experience. Next, internal with your employees. And then also strategic goal setting and actions taken by leadership within your company.
So all of those have a pretty broad focus, right? Number one priority, I think, is kind of regrounding in your company strategy and figuring out, okay, where do we sit, what's our foundation, and where do we want to go? When you're looking at that, a lot of companies maybe say, okay, we want to find growth, we want to be growth-minded, but that can mean a bunch of different things, right? Do you want to grow revenues? Do you want to grow headcount? Do you want to grow customers? Do you want to grow and just maybe your geographic footprint? What types of things do you recommend from a consulting side to maybe try and narrow down that focus for people who want to grow, but they don't necessarily know which way to do that?
Yeah, definitely. I would look to have a balanced and diversified approach. So most cycles have tended to vary in duration and intensity. So you just want to ensure that you're planning for the worst case scenario and then proactively responding to customers and the market to ensure the success and viability of your business. You want to make sure that you're not making decisions in a silo or for short-term gain that may affect your business in more of a long-term sense. And then also looking at what happened in past cycles and learning from what you did, and then the mistakes that were previously made. You need to take some of the best practices from what was previously happened in other cycles and then incorporate them into your business. And then also externally with customers. We suggest reaching out to your network to possibly gain additional insights, and then also look to bring on additional help if needed, if there's a particular issue that your company is struggling with.
And Nick, sticking onto that last point, bringing on additional help, can you talk to the different aspects of recruiting during volatile markets? I can only imagine you need to have the right roles and really be sure and more focused on who you need to hire and when.
Yeah, definitely. So I think you can look at this in two different buckets. So, first you want to make sure that you have the roles in place to service your customers. But then you also want to make sure that you have the proper roles internally to service, those operational needs. So making sure internally that you have training set up, leadership in the correct places, but then also externally, or internally, I should say, with, to be able to externally service your customers. We've looked into, exploring nearshoring partners where possible to limit costs and then streamline operations. But at the end of the day, you just want to make sure that all of your customers' needs are being met and that you have a plan for any changes in the market.
So when that market maybe does change, and we're talking volatility, of course, so we're not necessarily anticipating big trends, and it makes that sudden shift, a lot of companies maybe can find that they were on one trajectory and then all of a sudden that strategy isn't working anymore. When you're trying to make a quick pivot, do you have any advice on what that looks like for maybe a company leader who has to walk back and say, okay, we put forth this strategy, but now we've got to take it back a step and maybe recalculate our direction?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, where you want to make sure that you're not making decisions in a silo or too hastily, or even in times such as this, not making sure that you're making larger moves that could impact the business moving forward and that you can't pivot from. There's definitely planning that goes into place in relation to that to ensure that if a decision is going down the wrong path, that you can quickly refocus, and then switch to a different area, to potentially solve that.
And Nick, can you talk on really what those shifting market conditions, things like that, how important relationships are during this entire process? Because I can only imagine that communication and that relationship building gets a little bit more critical during these times.
Yeah, definitely. At the end of the day, customer satisfaction and experience is probably the most important thing here to note. The customer is truly at the center of your business, and ensuring that, your internal areas are aligned with the customer needs and expectations will definitely help throughout volatile times. Ensuring that you're meeting the various needs of your customers, and then looking at your carrier relationships, for example, continuing to build those relationships so that when the market does change again, you have those foundational elements in place. And then one note on top of this is empathy for customers as well. Using that as a differentiator in the market. Understand that your customers might be going through hard times, and your company could be as well. But customers ultimately do respond positively to partners that they feel understand them. Something that we talk about here at Metaphor is really going the extra mile. So want to make sure that your company is showing value and acting not just in a business sense, but also as a partner where possible.
Nick, has there been anything during the last kind of 2 years working with your clients at Metaphor that has really surprised you, where they've come out and said, okay, this is our priority, and you maybe look at them and you're like, why is that your priority? I'm not quite sure, but sure, I'll help you out with it, but maybe that's not where we need to be focused?
Yeah, definitely. So if you're looking at customer relationships versus carrier relationships, and having maybe a company focus on one particular set of relationships, I think you need to look at it holistically. So everybody that's having interactions with your business in some sense, really making sure that you're servicing them properly, so that at the end of the day, you're continuing to build those relationships and you're not breaking any bridges in any way.
And one of the other aspects I can only imagine is very crucial is definitely having a diversified approach, really not being too heavily leveraged into one particular area. Can you talk to how important that might be during a slowing or volatile market?
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's really just not putting all of your eggs in one basket. You want to make sure that, you're diversified in a way where if something does go awry during, volatile or difficult times, that one business decision doesn't set you on a path that will potentially disrupt the viability of your business. So it all goes back to strategic planning, making sure that you have a correct path forward for the business. And that, as I mentioned earlier, all the eggs aren't in one basket. So if something does go wrong, you can't quickly pivot and make business decisions to kind of address any of those concerns.
So looking at where we're at right now in this current volatile market, we're seeing a lot of truckload carriers come out and say, okay, you know what, we're expecting maybe some normalization and some return back to decent performance by the middle of the year. But at the same time, you're still seeing brokerage have to deal with layoffs or a cut back or a scale back. Where do you guys sit in your opinion of where you think the market is going to head? Do you think that we're in for a couple more maybe rocky months, maybe a rocky end to Q1 and start to Q2, and then a bit of smoothing out by the end of the year?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think that there's a couple volatile months ahead of us right now. That's definitely what we're seeing with talking to some of our customers and then being at various conferences lately and just getting the pulse of the market. But we do anticipate, better times ahead. And there is definitely optimism within the market that things will improve as we look to get towards the end of the year.
Definitely one of the things that you need to do is consult with experts. And Nick, if people want to find out more about Metaphor, yourself, get more in touch with what they can do right now, how can they do that?
Yeah, definitely. I would suggest checking out our website. And then if you have any questions, we can definitely send out some contact info, but really appreciate you calling that out.
All right, Nick, thank you so much for joining us today. And of course, we will talk to you guys soon.
Perfect. Thanks for having me on.
So much to take in consideration during shifting market trends.
Absolutely. Where do you want to be and where do you want to go?
That's right. And I'm sure we'll cover all that in an upcoming virtual event. But first, we're going to take a break and we have more Freight Waves Now coming up soon.